it's me, Rebecca the Booknester, and I am back to talk to you about the two books that I just finished at the end of October. The first is The Secret History by Donna Tartt, and I listened to that on audiobook. And I think that's probably the only way that I could have gotten through this giant of a book. There's been a lot of discussion, and I know tons of people who absolutely love The Secret History. I'm a little bit in between. I do think listening to it is the best way I could have read through it. I don't know that I would have been able to go and continue reading. So the story basically is about it's a group of about 5 people that are met at a very liberal arts small college in Vermont. And one of the reasons I was interested in this book is that it's actually based on an area that I live really close by and a college that's really close by. And actually some things that are mentioned in the book, I actually know where those are around here. Even a pub that was mentioned in there is still operating, and I go to that. But the thing about the book is that you know right off the bat, this is not giving anything away, that someone is murdered, and that you pretty much know that it's from this group, that not only the person who's murdered, but the group who end up murdering this individual. There are some other new things that go along the way, but it's more of a why done it and less of a who done it, because then you go back in time and you start tracing the steps up to the murder, and then you have a huge part of the book that is after the murder as well. So I will say this, I loved that storyline and I liked the characters. So why am I not raving about this book? It's because I think it was a little bit too highbrow for me. Yeah, I think that there was a lot of stuff in there. So this group of people are all interested in Greek, both speaking it, the history of it. They are all studying underneath this one professor who is really pushing Greek and Latin and all the stories. And one of the reasons for the murder is tied into that passion and desire to learn more about Greek, historical Greek. And one of the things that happens in the book, and why I think it would have been so hard for me to actually have read it, is there is a lot of other languages. So they do talk in Greek at periods of times. Greek and Latin. They also talk in French at times. And the way it was read, and it said it was an unabridged version, so to me I'm getting everything that you would get in the book, but I could be wrong, so let me know about this. There was a lot of times they actually spoke in Greek or they spoke in a different language, and you never really heard what was being said. It's not like it then would transcribe it for you or translate it for you. And what I felt was this constant referral back to all the Greek mythology and the Greek history. I don't know it that well. And I'm not talking just the mythology of the Greek gods that most of us know. I'm talking deep history and philosophy. And so I hate to say it, but I think that part of the book, I don't know if I could have made it through that. But in essence, the story is very interesting. I think the characters, though none of them are likable, they're all fascinating. So I did really like the characters. I liked the story itself. I felt like it was probably an extra 400 pages than it needed to be because of not only the extra Greekness all around, but there was some times when the story just kind of meandered and you're like, I don't really know why we're going down this road. But great development of characters, I think. And yes, the writing is superb. It's really great writing. The problem with it for me is I don't think I could recommend this to everybody, and we know that's one of my criteria for a true 5-star read, or to most everyone. I don't think I could, because I did listen to it, so I don't know, slogging through some of that stuff, that's what it would feel like. I think this is a hit or miss with people. If you have any background in that, I think you'd find it very fascinating and interesting, because I don't have a background in that, more of the true way back classics, and not a lot of interest in it. It kind of made for the story to be difficult. Now, I have not read her newest one, which is The Goldfinch. I know there's a story in between. I probably would listen to The Goldfinch. Again, it's another large book, so I'd have to see. I'd be very leery, though, at this point, just because I felt in some ways that all that extra scholastic discussion that was going on, at times it was off-putting. It kind of made it unapproachable to me and made me, you know, whether that was the intention or not, I just felt like it was a little bit too much over the top for me. So I really can feel honest, it's a 3-star. I enjoyed the story. I enjoyed the characters. I just didn't enjoy all the other parts that came with it as much. And I'll never pick it up again and try to read it myself. But I would be very interested to know if all the language I'm talking about, if you've read this, and I know this is some people's favorite book, if you've read it, and the parts where they had the different languages, how did you work through that? Because I mean, it's like whole languages, not just one little word here and there. And was there any, I don't know, subtext or any, you know, little notes at the bottom that maybe explained what they were saying? Because it wasn't done in the audio that I listened to. The other thing is I thought was interesting, and one thing I was excited about, it was actually read by Donna Tartt. And I thought, she's going to slam this home because she knows how she meant everybody to interact and react. I found her voice a little slow, and I had to speed it up to be able to listen to it. I felt that there wasn't as good characterization for the different voices as with somebody who is more of a typical audiobook reader, so a professional narrator. So I think it might be interesting to have had somebody with a little bit more abilities to do that, to make this even more interesting. But it was pretty good, and I did keep listening, and I wanted to keep listening. So that tells you something about the story, and I made it all the way through. So good book, but not a great one, and not one that I feel I can recommend to everyone. But the writing, as I say, is great. The story is very interesting. There's just a lot of that extra. So if you know, that scholastic discussions and philosophy thoughts and stuff, I probably missed a lot of it because I'm not versed in a lot of that. So if you are, this would be a great book for you, I'm sure. All right, so now on to the next one. You all know that in my first book rumble that I had, the Battle of the Books there, that I chose you to read for my scary, scary, scary read for going into Halloween. And woo, this is a doozy. So I think it's interesting because, you know, we have a tendency to watch each other talking about books and review books, and you're like, I've heard all these wonderful things about this story and that it's really creepy and scary. Somehow I missed along the lines that it is in your face, high sexuality, all kinds of crazy stuff going on. I'll be honest with you. Okay, so my husband came up to spend the week with me, and I was trying to finish up this book, and I kept catching myself going, please don't let him lean over my shoulder and look what I'm reading. And it's not because of anything other than he would really give me a lot of crud for it. I mean, a lot of crap. He would have picked on me like you wouldn't believe. So, you know, it is a stalker, and he is sexually attracted to the main character. And so there's, I mean, right from the get-go, it is in your face discussions of not only what he wants to do, but what she's wearing, what she's not. And it's just, wow. And even throughout the book, her escapades, it's all a lot of sexual discussion. So I have to put a warning on that. I mean, it is pretty in your face. Now, I don't typically read books like this, and it isn't so much that I'm a prude. It's just, usually my books don't take me down this road. This one, whoa, this one took me down that road. But the other thing is this book scary? And that's what everybody says, and I have to say it's incredibly disturbing. But it's interesting. So when I first read it, and I did that little, you know, just the first chapter, I was hooked, and I was like, wow, this is pretty creepy, being inside the stalker's mind. So that's what the story's about. It is from the stalker's perspective, as if he's talking to the person he's stalking. So in this case, her name is Guinevere Beck. She goes by Beck for most of the book. Other creepy thing is he's a bookseller. Okay, so he works in a bookstore, and he's got a funny little place downstairs for special books and special people too. So, you know, it made it a little uncomfortable for somebody who loves going into bookstores and loves chatting with the bookstore owners. And Rebecca's often shortened to Becky or Beck, so a little bit creepy, just enough for me. But this book, the uncomfortableness, comes from my reaction as a reader while I was reading it, and I kept catching myself because they actually do end up having a relationship. And the thing that's bizarre is there were times when I'm thinking, oh, that's really sweet. Oh, look how much he knows, or look what he's doing. You know, and I'm like, whoa, back up the truck. No. I shouldn't be feeling this way. This is gross. This is creepy. This is wrong. And so I think that more of the creepiness in this book came from me constantly checking myself back into reality that this was not a romance. This is not a rom-com at all. And sometimes you're shook back into it, and other times you're just kind of like going along thinking everything's great, and then you go, no, this is not right. So the book is very well paced. I did want to keep going with it. There was a couple little avenues it took that I was like, well, okay, that's a little far-fetched, but you know, that's what this is. It's about to what lengths this guy would go to have Beck all his own, and if that meant, you know, separating her from other people. Now, I have to tell you something else that was really great about this book and very unusual. So now that I already talked about the secret history, and that I wasn't in love with any one of those characters, that all of them had huge flaws and were kind of, they weren't really great people in general. They were usually very narcissistic and kind of stuck on themselves and everything else. In this book, I had a hard time feeling bad for Beck because I didn't really like this girl. She was toxic to everybody she was involved in. And it's kind of interesting because he rationalizes her behavior like you wouldn't believe, and he blames everyone else. So that mindset, however that Caroline Kepnes, I think is how you would say her name, the author, got into that mindset of how somebody can rationalize anybody, you know, somebody's behavior, and it was not, it wasn't good behavior. Beck was not a good person. Was amazing to me and believable. So it is a good story. It's a great story. I read it all the way through. I won't read it again. And I'll have to be really careful with who I would recommend this to, because like I said, I'd have to be really blunt and let you know that you can't get away from the in-your-face sexuality and discussion of sex and sex acts and what's going on. Now again, it's not that anything is really weird and bizarre, it's just always there, and it's really in your face. And but I have to say this, I don't believe it was done to be sensationalistic. I think it was very appropriate. I think it was the way that people would talk. These characters would talk this way. They would probably behave this way. So I felt like it actually added to the characters and also the uneasiness a little bit. But it wasn't done for just sensationalism. It wasn't done to make you go, oh my gosh. You know, it wasn't done like that. I think it was appropriate. It's just not always something, I mean, again, this is not what I typically pick up, that's for sure. So, good book. Again, probably only 3 stars for me, but that is more from my standards that I have. I won't reread it. I won't recommend it to too many people. But I will say this, I think that if you're okay with those things I talked about, this is a good book. I think you'd really like it. And it is unnerving and it's uncomfortable. You know, it's not a cozy read. Far from it. So, some good little twists in it, some little additional stuff I didn't quite understand, but I think it was very well done, and it's not a book that you slog through. You really end up flying through it pretty quickly, at least I did, and I'm not the world's fastest reader. So, those are the last 2 books that I've read, finishing out October, and now we're moving into November, and I'm trying to participate in Nonfiction November that is being hosted by a multitude of other, well, not hosted, but there's a lot of participants here on book 2. But I have started reading another uncomfortable read in a way called The Nazi and the Psychiatrist by Jack Elha. I'm not sure if I'm saying that correct. Elha. It is about one of the top guys. The Nazi is one that actually would have almost taken over for Adolf Hitler had anything happened to him. He was almost like ideally next in line. And the psychiatrist is actually sent in to the from the arms. He's an army, I think, but he's a scientist or psychiatrist that's going in to find out what made these individuals, these Nazis that are all in a prison camp right now. They're all, well, it's actually just a prison, not even a camp. It's an old hotel. And he's going to go in and interview them and spend time with them and trying to find out, you know, how did they do the things they did? Did they all have a commonality? Was it, you know, something that kind of made them tick, you know, that. And so I'm very interested. I've already started reading the first couple chapters, and I think that the psychiatrist has almost as many issues possibly as the very people that he's interviewing and researching. And this has all happened after they were caught, immediately after they were caught waiting for the Nuremberg trials, and you know, right after World War II. So I'm interested in this one. I think it'll be very, very interesting. I have also read in the past the Professor and the Madman, which was the development of the dictionary, and that was a really fascinating, amazing read. Loved it. In fact, I really recommend anybody that wants to go out there and read something for Nonfiction November. That's a great book. It's pretty simple, pretty small. I'm looking to see if I have it up on my bookshelf because it is one of my favorites, but it's a really good book. I'm wondering if this one's going to be a little bit similar to that with this kind of odd relationship, and we'll see where it goes, and I'll be back in to check with you. So for right now, that's what I'm reading, and then of course I just finished oh, and I also listened on tape to my first Muriel Sparks, and oh my gosh, I have got to talk to Adam over at Memento Mori, because if this is how she typically writes, and this is the type of book, she sounds like an amazing author, and it was Loitering with Intent. But it was a great reading. It was a great story, very fascinating, kind of another why done it, who done it, but my first Muriel Sparks, and it was great. So if you get a chance, if you're interested, go out and take a look at that one as well. But I finished that one recently too. So ultimately, that's about it for me right now. And I'm going to be focusing on the Nazi and the Psychiatrist and finishing that up and continuing with November. I'm not sure if I'm going to read only nonfiction. There'll have to be some pretty good books to keep my attention for that, or if I'm going to be listening to something else. Right now, I'm trying to listen to a book about Mozart. It's proving to be difficult because there's so much dates and things coming at me that I almost would rather be reading it than listening to it, but we'll see how that turns out. So I hope you're having a great beginning to your November. Let me know if you're participating in Nonfiction November as well, and let me know what you've been reading. And as I always say, keep turning those pages. Have a great day.